Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the Philadelphia Flyers and how they probably can't wait for the season to be over as their struggles continue to mount. But before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So Philadelphia had a pretty good season last year and they nearly made the playoffs, probably should have made it as they looked like they were a lock before they seemingly couldn't get the job done, and that hurt. But going into this season, I think the expectations were dampened where you just realize they're going to be cycling in a lot of new and younger players. And on top of that, they're going to be getting a lot of these younger guys more minutes and more opportunities. So you said, okay, it's going to be a hard road for them. And we kind of got a glimpse of that early on in the year as they hit a 6-game skid within their first 10 games. And I think a lot of us just said to ourselves, this is where it begins, where this is going to be a long season for Philadelphia. Then they were able to kind of correct themselves in a way as they played close to 500 hockey going into about early March. And you thought, okay, while we won't be a playoff team, we're still kind of going to be in the mix where we're not officially out of it. And this won't necessarily end up being as embarrassing of a season as we thought it could be. Now fast forward from early March into where we are now, and Philadelphia is going 1-9-1 over their past 11 games. Undoubtedly, they have the worst points percentage in the league in that time. And it's just kind of hard because of the fact that there's been more of those traditional losses where you see a loss against a good team like the Carolina Hurricanes 5-0. But then their most recent loss against Chicago was really just gut-wrenching, 7-4 against Chicago, another side that is towards the bottom of the standings. But Chicago is kind of supposed to be down there at the moment, whereas Philadelphia maybe not as bad as that, and to get thrashed, I guess, to that extent is not good. I think at one point it was like 2-3 or 3-2, whatever the point is. They end up nearly allowing 10 goals in this game. I guess that's a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but it's still a bad look for the Flyers. They are also in a spot where they're kind of flirting with the Buffalo Sabres to have the worst record in the Eastern Conference. They have a worse points percentage and they have played more games than Buffalo. So I guess in all reality, if the Sabres are able to pick up 4 points over the next 3 games, they would be better than the Flyers. And it's just almost unimaginable because Buffalo, I almost said Philly, Buffalo had a 13-game skid. Mind you, Philly was pretty close to having a 11-game skid of their own, but they got that 4-3 win over Tampa Bay. And also this would be the 5th year in a row that the Flyers have missed the playoffs, if they miss, which they likely will, which is something that I don't think has happened since the early to mid-1990s. So a long time for Philadelphia. What is kind of going wrong in this time? So many things we could kind of talk about. A lack of offense from the blue line. Emil Andrae, guys like Nick Seeler, and then Rasmus Ristolainen. Almost said Dahlin because we were just talking about the Sabres. They have combined for 0 points in the previous 11 games. Now, granted, Ristolainen has only played 5 of those games because I think he was injured before the Four Nations face-off, came back and got injured again. But 3 defensemen there with 0 points in that time. Then you have Travis Sanheim and Cam York that have combined for, I believe, 3 points. Meanwhile, Andrei Kuzmenko had 2 points in the previous 11 games. Now, there's a couple of problems that kind of stick out here in that regard. Andrei Kuzmenko only played 2 games. That's kind of one of those things where you're like, well, 2 points in 2 games, that's not too bad for him. Then there's another problem. Andrei Kuzmenko doesn't even play for the team anymore. He got traded. He's in LA now, I think. So that is kind of embarrassing when you realize you've got 5 defensemen with, 3 points between the 5 of them in that time. Really bad look in that regard, and just one of those things that is hard to kind of pinpoint because you'll say, well, Nick Seeler is leading the league in shots blocked per 60, I believe, among all defensemen. And you don't want to just look at points and all of these things, but I think across the board for a lot of these guys, the numbers aren't really looking great. And it is just not ideal over the backstretch of a season where they're really limping to the finish line. They're kind of just hovering. They're hoping somebody would drag them across the way because it seemingly feels like it's going to be impossible to get them there. Now we've talked about some issues on the blue line in terms of generating offense. What about the power play? Who leads the team in goals, points, whatever over this time? The answer is nobody. There have been 0 goals on the man advantage over the past 11 games. They've gone over 29. This is kind of fitting though because Philadelphia ended up having the worst power play percentage I think last season. This year they're not worse in the league. They are close to it. And again, I think they've kind of got this flirtatious vibe going along with the ability to snag that They said, Buffalo, you don't deserve to have the worst record in the Eastern Conference. And also, whoever is bottom of the league for power play percentage right now, you don't deserve to have that either. We are going to take that back-to-back years. A big, bragging point there to be worst on the man advantage back-to-back years. And then you realize that, okay, well, if that's not working out for us, we're going to probably have to rely more on our forwards to generate offense at 5-on-5. And things aren't really going that well either there in terms of scoring goals, paired with what we've talked about kind of feel like extensively during this course of the year for a lot of these bad teams, but especially the Philadelphia Flyers. Poor results in net, which is a big hindrance, which is all just culminated into what is now turning into what likely will be a pretty bad year. And I know bad teams will tend to lose, and I get that, but the results kind of do feel lackluster, especially when you're seeing some of the totals from players and the numbers and whatnot. But the question is, does it even matter? In my opinion, honestly, it doesn't, because what were they going to do? Were they going to be mediocre? They're going to be okay-ish, not make the playoffs, and then say, oh, well, at least we weren't one of the worst teams in the league. I don't really care about that as much unless you are on the way up. And when you think about it as well, too, Washington's in their division. Washington's the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Carolina's in their division. Carolina's been to the Eastern Conference Final 2 times in a short-ish amount of time. Then you've got other teams like Tampa Bay and Florida that get really aggressive at the trade period to try to boost the cup odds. Toronto, a side that is ever so dangerous and never actually does anything. But this could be the year. Those are 5 teams right there that I'm listing off that ultimately I think would just kind of mop the floor with the Flyers if they met them in the first round, if they somehow miraculously even got there. But they aren't trying to. You have to remember that and focus on the fact that the Flyers have 3 first-round picks this year. They will get a high pick this year as well, too, because of the fact that things just kind of keep spiraling for them. And they have, 12 picks in the first 3 rounds over the next 2 drafts. It just makes sense to kind of stall things out. You've got other teams as well, too, that are really trying to work their way up. Ottawa, Detroit, prime examples of these. And then you're seeing teams like Montreal and Columbus possibly work their way up, too. It doesn't make sense, and ultimately for a team like Philadelphia, you live to fight another day. There's going to be a lot of change. I think we can see that going for this team in the next couple of years. Like we see with a lot of rebuilding teams, John Tortorella probably wasn't ever going to be the long-term guy. And it's not just him. Again, there's going to have to be changes in net. There's going to have to be so many things that have to go on here for Danny to try to get this team back to being a competitive side. But I think we're all pretty aware right now that this team is nowhere near to being a cup contender. And these 11 games, while not being the Flyers on average, do certainly show us what they can be at their worst. And this is where you say for Philadelphia fans that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And you just going to have to wait things out, as well as maybe what your in-state rivals are doing with Pittsburgh to an extent. As I think Talking Hockey kind of exposed the fact, not really exposed, but just highlighted the fact that they've got like 30-some picks in the upcoming few drafts or whatever it is. So they can really try to make a move too. So maybe we'll see the state of Pennsylvania get really aggressive through the draft and try to work up in the standings that way. But yeah, I guess that this is just kind of a rough go of it, and that loss to the Hawks really did sting. Especially because I feel like that the Flyers have better veteran difference makers compared to what the Hawks have. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked on that. What are your thoughts on the Philadelphia Flyers over their past 11 games, especially for the course of the season and for the future? Are they a team that is going to try to be pretty bad in order to get some of that game-changing talent? And how do you think that'll go? Also, again, I don't think Michkov is going to win the Calder, which kind of gloss over what's been a tough go of things lately. But still, he'll have a good chance of getting to 60 points for the season and maybe get 25 goals, something like that. I don't know. I'm just trying to look for positives for the course of the season. You've got a lot of younger players on the blue line. Of course, we've already talked about some of these guys like Jamie Drysdale and then Cam York, whatnot. We're getting sidetracked here. Leave your thoughts on the Flyers. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.